A long time ago, I made a deck about Soul of Windgrace. This was one of my $15 decks, and the entire premise of that deck was to make a Soul of Windgrace commander deck based on lands, and that was about it. It was a lot earlier in my $15 deck challenge, and I didn't really have a guaranteed direction that I wanted to take the deck or the series. I've had a lot more time and experience building these decks now, and I think it's time that I go ahead and revisit that old deck now that I've spent plenty of time building it in paper, running a bunch of games with it over the last few months, and kind of coming to my own conclusions on how this deck should function. I didn't have as many ways to close out games in the original build, and I had a lot of superfluous fluff that I'll be able to tune out in the update. That all said, let's go ahead and talk about Soul of Windgrace, a very, very fun Lands Matter deck that I hope you will enjoy. Soul of Windgrace is a Jund +1 mana commander that says when he enters the battlefield or attacks, put any land card from anyone's graveyard onto the battlefield tapped under your control. He also lets you pay green to gain 5 life by discarding a land, red and 1 to discard a land and draw a card, or black and 2 to discard a land and give him indestructible while tapping him. Now that's a lot of text, so what are we going to be doing? Well, we're going to be trying to make maximum use of the ability to get 2 lands on the battlefield per turn, once from our hand and once from Windgrace, and if we end up getting other people's lands in the process, then that is also gravy, but we want to primarily be winning via our own cards. So let's go ahead and talk about the core strategy of what we are doing. We are going to be trying to go for some big mana payoffs and token generation. First off on the chopping block is going to be Malimo Maro Sorcerer. He's one of our 7 big mana payoff cards. Malimo gets power and toughness equal to the number of lands you control. He's super understandable, very, very basic, and he'll be able to close out games on his own if he is not kept in check. Then we have the Centaur Vine Crasher that enters the battlefield with 1/1 counters equal to the number of lands in all graveyards, and if a land is put into a graveyard from anywhere, we can pay 2 and put this card from our graveyard into our hand to play it over and over again. Centaur Vine Crasher may not look like much, but I have been able to threaten boards with him very, very often. The amount of lands you can get in the grave in this deck can border on absurd in certain builds, so being able to just drop this guy out as an 8/8 or a 9/9 or a 10/10 and then threaten people with him every turn, it is a very scary sight. We also have the new Rumbleweed card from Thunder Junction. Costs 1 less for every land in our graveyard. It has Vigilance, Reach, and Trample, which is good on its own as an 8/8, but as it enters the battlefield, it adds 3/3 and Trample to all the creatures on our board, meaning any tokens that we spawn are now going to have a way to close out the game. This was something that was severely lacking in my old Windgrace build. I had plenty of ways to get tokens on the board, but I really suffered from an ability to break parity. I have a better understanding of how to handle that now. Then we have Hurricane, one of my favorite ways to close out games on people. It's basically green fireball. Pay 1 and X and deal X damage to every creature with flying and every player. This will not touch our commander or really anything in our deck, but what it will do is let us close out games on people who are otherwise hard to attack. Blackblade Reforged gives creature 1/1 for every land we control. We're going to put this on our commander and threaten people's livelihoods. Then we have the Uven-Walled Hydra, whose power and toughness are equal to the number of lands we have, and when it touches the battlefield, we can search our library for any land card and put it on the battlefield tapped. I've added more grab a regular land, like any kind of land from the deck abilities, because the first Windgrace deck had 45 lands and lots of basics and some fetching lands. The new version of the deck has 41 lands and recognizes that the strongest lands from the original build were the hidden lands, the ones that let you sacrifice them to discover 4. Those basically allowed me to stay in games that I otherwise should have had no business surviving in, and being able to recur those lands was super important. So I found that getting one of those lands as early as possible is equally important. In comes cards like Uven-Walled Hydra with the ability to get any land we want from our deck onto the battlefield. a fantastic effect that we are going to use to stay in our games longer with hidden lands. Then we have Fecund Green Shell from the new Bloomburrow set. It's got reach, and it can give all of our creatures 2/2 permanently as long as we have 10 or more lands. Also, anytime it or another creature with toughness greater than its power touches the board, look at the top card of our library, and if it's a land, put it on the battlefield. Otherwise, put it in our hand. This card right here is going to be heavily abused in a strategy we're going to talk about later when we get into our tokens, but for now, keep the fact that he's here in the back of your mind. But we also want to make sure that we have more ways of winning the game besides combat, and for that, I have a couple of burn cards to go over as well. Spitfire Lagok burns everybody for 1 every time a land touches our battlefield. Retreat to Hagra does the same thing, while also making us gain a life, and then Valakut Exploration lets us impulse draw when lands touch the battlefield, and for every card we do not use from the impulse draw, we get to burn each opponent for damage equal to the amount of cards we didn't use. This means that we have a double duty card that our opponents are going to be very incentivized to get rid of very, very quickly. Then we have a Recursion package with far more things than my original build. Originally, I just had the Timeless Witness and the Perennial Behemoth to recycle lands and other cards. After playing the deck, though, I've realized that some of the cards can be quite threatening, and so it's very important to be able to get those cards back. In comes a newcomer Loam Crafter Fond, or Loam Crafter Fond. Whenever it comes onto the battlefield, we can discard 1 or more land cards and put that many non-land permanents from our graveyard directly into our hand. Our deck has lots and lots of permanents that serve lots of functions, so this is a way to recycle a lot of those all at once. And then we have Altar of Ball. This deck has a heavy token theme, and Altar of Ball will allow us to utilize those tokens to revive creatures in our graveyard so that we can keep a board state consistent. I didn't have anything like this in the original build, and the deck truly did suffer from that, and I felt it. Even though I was having a lot of fun playing the deck, I felt the loss of these cards as I was running it. So let's talk about those tokens, though, since we are going to be generating lots of them. We have 6 token generators. The first one is going to be Turn Timber Sower. Anytime one land gets into our graveyard from anywhere, say discarded from Windgrace, we can put a green plant creature token onto the battlefield, and we can also sacrifice 3 creatures to take a land from our graveyard and put it in our hand. Now, this card is important for our strategy for a number of reasons, but the primary thing I have it in here for is that these plants can benefit from Phylath World Sculptor. When this touches the board, we create a green plant for every basic land we control, of which we have several, and it has landfall every time a land touches our board. We can put 4 1/1 counters on a plant that we control. Now, both of these plants, all the plants that are summoned by these effects, do have toughness higher than their power. They are O1s after all. This means that all of these plant tokens will benefit directly from Fecund Green Shell. We have this on the board, and every time we spawn a plant, we get to use that ability. And of course, this makes the plants eventually become 2/3s, which can then be powered up even more by Phylath. But for some strong tokens right off the bat, we have Rampaging Baloths, gives us 4/4s every time we play a land. Titania gives us 5/3s anytime a land is put to the graveyard from the battlefield. Omnath Locus of Rage gives us 5/5s every time we play a land. And Zendikar's Royal will give us 2/2 green elementals anytime we play a land. Please note, though, that the purpose of Zendikar's Royal is not just to put 2/2 greens on the board. They're also elementals, which means Omnath Locus of Rage directly benefits from having access to those elementals, as he has a burn ability attached to him anytime one of our elementals touches the graveyard, which will happen often since we plan on swinging them at our opponents as much as possible. That all said, that is the core strategy of our deck. We are trying to get lots of lands on the board and burn our opponents to death or punch them down with big, huge numbers. We should be having our commander touch the board as often as possible and swing as often as possible to generate lands from everybody's graveyards. People who have fetch lands will be directly benefiting us, for instance, and we should be able to keep constant pressure this way. And the way the deck's built, even when we run out of cards in our hand and board, we should be able to lean on a certain type of land later on in the game. Normally, I would talk about these when I get to the land section, but I do want to quickly mention them as they are so important for our deck's strategy. These are the 3 hidden lands: Hidden Volcano, Hidden Nursery, and Hidden Necropolis. When we sacrifice these by paying 5 mana, we can exile cards till we touch a card with mana value 4 or less, and then just auto cast it. These can get us back in a game very, very quickly. Just being able to effectively freely cast spells off the top of our deck repeatedly over and over again, and since we've got so many cards that do have mana value of 4 or less that really do want to get dropped on the board at any point, these cards will directly benefit us even when we are on the back foot. And sidebar, I also think it's important to just build decks in a way that they can fight while on the back foot primarily, because you should not be pretending that your deck will always be in a dominant position on the board. That said, let's go ahead and get into draw power and how we're going to get into all of these cards to begin with. Now, when I built the original version of this deck, I didn't actually know all of the cards that I wanted to put in it in the first place, especially with the draw engine. I was newer to building hyper-budget decks, and I used a lot of cards that just drew a couple cards out of the deck and basically left it at that. This had the benefit of operating very well within what the hidden lands allowed, but it didn't have as many bombastic effects as I think you should have in a game of Commander. It was more kind of piddly and dirtily. So here is the revamped draw package of the deck. Some of the cards are the ones that were in the original build. Some of these are brand new. Let's start with Ambition's Cost. Lets us draw 3 cards and lose 3 life. Pretty simple. Blood Pact lets us draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. Painful Truth lets us draw X cards, where X is the colors of mana we spend, so 3 mana. Magmatic Insight lets us draw 2 cards for discarding a land card. Read the Bones lets us draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. Harmonize lets us draw 3 cards. Siphon Mind lets us make everybody discard a card, and then we draw a card for every card discarded this way. Greed will allow us to draw through lots of our deck very quickly by paying life and drawing cards. Please do note, we do not have many ways of getting back life outside of our Hagra Blood Pit, so this card needs to be used very sparingly. Escape to the Wilds exiles the top 5 cards of our library, and then we can play any card exiled this way until the end of the turn. It also allows us to play an additional land this turn. Then we have Brass's Tunnel Grinder. This is one of the newer ones for the deck. Whenever we play it, we discard any number of cards and draw that many +1, and if we descended at any turn, which is just putting a permanent in our graveyard, we can put a counter on it, which is super easy to do with our Commander's discard ability. If we have 3 counters on the Tunnel Grinder, we can then get Tekultan the Searing Rift, which will add another option for discovering in our deck, which I think is super cool. Discover is a very fun mechanic. It's just like Cascade, and our Commander has a tendency to die a lot, so being able to add Discover onto the land we are going to tap to give ourselves access to the mana to play our Commander over and over, getting a Discover off of that just feels really, really good, and another way to get ourselves back in games if we are starting to falter. That all said, let's go ahead and talk about how we're going to disrupt other people's strategies. Now, removal is another section that I felt like it was very, very lacking in the original build, so I've revamped the removal section quite a bit for this deck, beginning with Wreck and Rebuild. It is one of the 12 removal pieces we will be running. This lets us blow up an artifact or an enchantment, or we can mill 5 cards and then grab a land card from among those and put it onto the battlefield tapped. It's also got Flashback, which is ridiculously useful for us. Return to Nature can get rid of a card in a graveyard at instant speed or blow up an artifact or an enchantment. Meteor Golem can blow up anything our heart desires. Decimate lets us blow up an artifact, creature, enchantment, and land, and luckily, this will let us blow up an opponent's land and then animate it with Windgrace for ourselves. So if somebody's got something really nice like a Gaia's Cradle, that's now our land forever. Then we have Hunter's Bow, which equips to a creature automatically upon playing it and makes that creature deal damage equal to its power to a creature we don't control. 9 times out of 10, this is just going to go right on our commander and give it a nice ward 2 and reach. Then we have Putrefy to blow up an artifact or a creature, Rex Sage to blow up an artifact or an enchantment, Casualties of War to blow up an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, and Planeswalker. Again, land removal is very great in this deck because we can then animate other people's lands. Binding the Old Gods blows up a non-land permanent, and then searches our library for a forest to drop on the battlefield, and then gives all of our creatures Death Touch for a final swing. Windgrace's Judgment blows up one of each non-land permanent any player controls. So we can just go, hey, player 1, 2, and 3, we're going to blow up a non-land permanent from each of you. Simple and easy. Canker Bloom can proliferate in certain situations, but also lets us blow up an artifact or enchantment by sacking it. And Maelstrom Pulse can blow up any non-land permanent, and all permanents that have the same name as that permanent, which is very good for getting rid of people's token boards. If somebody spawned a bunch of zombies, and that is their way of protecting themselves from us, Maelstrom Pulse 1 zombie, and it will hit all the zombies, and then we can attack freely into their life points. But we also need board wipes, and this is another area where the original deck was kind of lacking. I had things like Lavalanche in there that didn't do a whole lot, and Terror Tide, which is a fun card, but suffers from needing setup. And again, we don't want to play cards that only work when we are winning. So instead, we are going to run these 3 board wipes, starting with Gaze of Granite, blows up every non-land permanent with mana value X or less. This is the hard reset we need when we are stumbling behind, and we know that we can build a board state just fine using our Discover lands and using our commander. So use Gaze of Granite freely. Blow up everything. Don't worry about losing your shit. Just get your shit back with Windgrace and Hidden Lands. Then Massacre Girl does a fun chain reaction. Touches the board, gives all creatures -1/-1. If any creature died that way, then she will multiply that -1/-1 for every creature that dies. We have 0/1 insects that we summon in our deck, so Massacre Girl should be very easy to get online. Then we have Necromantic Selection. Blow up all creatures, then grab a creature from the graveyard that died this way and put it on the battlefield. This, 9 times out of 10, will just grab our commander again, but sometimes we'll use this to steal other people's commanders because Necromantic Selection is timed in such a weird way that nobody has a chance to respond with moving their commander to a new zone. So Necromantic Selection is basically goated. That said, let's move on to the ramp. Now, as far as ramp is concerned, the original package was just fine, but I wanted to add a little more spice into this one that had come out recently, and we still need to find more ways of getting lands onto the board, not just basic lands, because our commander wants to be able to reuse hidden lands. So let's go ahead and begin with Enris Gloomstalker. She's basically a lieutenant for our commander. She gives us another bit of access to the punch somebody, return a land from the graveyard to the battlefield. Elvish Rejuvenator can get any land from the top 5 cards of our deck. Wayfarer's Bauble can get a basic land from our deck. Road to Ruin can grab a basic land and then also gives us a removal spell on top of it. Springbloom Druid can sack a land to grab 2 basics, which means we can get that land back with our commander. Beanstalk Giant can get a land from our graveyard get our land from our deck onto the battlefield, and also can be a big monster in its own right. Hour of Promise is one of the new additions. It searches our library for 2 land cards, any land cards, and puts them on the battlefield tapped. If we have 3 or more deserts, it would make zombies, but we don't have deserts, and that is fine. Dawn Shredder Elk can sack itself to get a basic land, just like Wayfarer's Bauble. Clifftop Lookout is a new one for the deck. This touches the board, reveals cards at the top of our library until we hit a land card, and then puts that card on the battlefield tapped. This can be anything, including one of our hidden lands. Search for Tomorrow grabs a basic land, also can be suspended on turn 1. Viewpoint Synchronization grabs 3 basic lands from our deck and puts 2 of them on the battlefield tapped and the other into our hand, but it has free running, so if our commander deals combat damage to a player, then we can cast it for 3 mana instead. Wood Elves can grab a forest out of our deck onto the battlefield, which is something that we were missing in the original deck, and Roiling Regrowth can sacrifice any land to go ahead and get 2 basics out of our deck and put them onto the battlefield. Now, As for the lands themselves, the original version of the deck ran like 35 basics. We've gone down to 20 basics to make room for some other things that we were missing. So we've got 8 forests, 6 swamps, and 6 mountains, but we've got some dual lands too. Not many for space reasons, but we are running Tainted Wood and Tainted Peak so that we can get our Jund colors if we have a swamp, and Cinderglade and Smoldering Marsh as they do come into play untapped, and we can grab them with things like Wood Elves, or at least we can grab the Cinderglade with Wood Elves. Then we've revamped the fetching lands section of the deck just a little bit. It's still running about 11 cards, but we have access to the new Twisted Landscape this time around, which lets us get a basic swamp, mountain, or forest onto the battlefield, and we can cycle the Twisted Landscape so we can have it perform double duty. Cycle it out of your hand, draw a card, get it on the board with your commander, and then sack it to get a land from your deck onto the battlefield. Myriad Landscape ramps us when we sack it, Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse make returns, and Escape Tunnel is another version of Evolving Wilds that didn't exist when I built the original deck. Promising Vein, Shire Terrace, Naya Panorama, and Jund Panorama are all the same exact card for our deck's purposes. Riveteer's Outlook lets us get any of the basics our deck has automatically without even tapping it, so we can just get this over and over again with our commander, and we never have to worry about speed. Blighted Woodland can give us 2 basic lands out of our deck when we tap it and use 4 mana. We have the 2 Omni lands still, Command Tower and Exotic Orchard, and we still have the 3 utility lands of the Hidden Lands, but we also have 1 extra utility land in Demolition Field, letting us blow up anybody's non-basic lands, and then use those lands for our own purposes with our commander, giving us about 3 or 4 ways to blow up our opponent's lands to use them for our own deck. When I built the original deck, I honestly didn't know Windgrace could steal lands from other people's graveyards, so I was building it entirely with the purpose of getting our own lands back and reusing them. Imagine my surprise when I found out that I could use it to take somebody's fetch land and just play $20 cards in our $15 deck. Silly me. But speaking of $20 cards, what would we do if we actually wanted to upgrade the deck a little bit further than what's shown here? Well, as with any of the decks that I make, if you have a particular card you don't like in the 99, then go ahead and replace it with one of these upgrades if you've got the budget for it. There is no budget for the upgrades here. Just grab what you like and take out what you don't. That all said, let's start with the easy ones. Harrow and Cultivate and Kadama's Reach and Nature's Lore and 3 Visits. These are all just straight up upgrades to previously existing cards in the deck that will give you better and more consistent land draws. Farseek is also a good option as well, and there's plenty of other ways you can get forests straight out of your deck. Just pick and choose what you want. Crop Rotation is another really good one that we didn't have the budget for in this deck that can get one of our hidden lands very, very early. Lord Windgrace himself, the original one, gives you access to draw and being able to draw additional cards if we happen to discard lands. Being able to get 2 lands from our graveyard to the battlefield is also really neat for our landfall triggers, and he's got a really, really strong ult that we will never see if he's not our commander. Avenger of Zendikar is another win con that we have access to if you've got the $2.50 to spare for it. Beast Within is an all-star in any deck that has green, as it can blow up lands on top of anything else. Normally generic removal, I try not to put in these, but like this card blows up a land, so our commander benefits from that directly. 6 is a new card from MH3. When it attacks, we mill 3 and grab a land, drop it into our hand, and if it's our turn, all non-land cards in our graveyard get retraced, where we can discard lands to recast them. This is a super strong recursion piece that should be in the full power version of the deck if you are playing one. Marog, Fury of Akum, can turn landfalls into extra combats. Oracle of Medaya gives us extra lands and pseudo draw from the top of our deck. Springheart and Nantuko allows us to copy our creatures if we pay mana when we landfall. Imagine using this to copy Avenger of Zendikar. The craziness gets insane. Iridescent Vanisher is another way to burn everybody when lands touch our board, but it's got Offspring, so we can get 2 of these. So every time we drop a land, everybody burns for 2. And then, of course, we can just copy that with Springheart and Antuco. Scoot Swarm is a win con in its own right, being able to exponentially grow every time we drop a land on the board. I have unironically seen calculated notation versions of Scoot Swarms on boards where it's impossible to actually, like, conceptualize, 345 to the second power or something like that amount of Scoot Swarms. Then we have Fabled Passage, which can get us basic lands out of the deck, and it's getting cheaper and cheaper every day thanks to its recent reprint. Then we also have the Get Rog Monster, a super easy way to sacrifice lands, play additional lands, and also get draw off of discarding lands with our commander. Ancient Green Warden lets us double up on all of our landfall abilities. Awaken the Woods can cause our landfall abilities to instantly go nutty. Imagine you have Iridescent Vine Lasher Offspring, so now you do 2 damage to people every time you drop land on the board. You play Awaken the Woods and you spend 10 mana into it. That means 8 is your X. That spawns 8 Green Forest Dryads. Those are tokens. They burn for 2 for every token. Your opponents all burn for 16. Let's imagine that number as big as you possibly can want, because it is a landfall deck, and that's how much damage this thing can do. It's kind of crazy. Omnixilus the Fallen gives us another access to burn whenever we drop lands on the board, and Green Sleeves Morrow Sorcerer gives us access to more big tokens when we drop lands down. I run Green Sleeves in AC, and I think that if it weren't $25 frigging dollars, then it would be in every landfall deck. But unfortunately, it is too expensive for most people, which sucks because, I mean, I love the card. Why does it have to cost 10 more than this whole deck alone? Dang it. Anyway, those are all the upgrades that I can immediately think of for the deck. If you have any that you want to suggest, then drop them in the comment section below. But with that said, we gotta wrap things up. In conclusion, Soul of Windgrace is going to be as fun with this build as the original one that I made. I spent a lot of time playing that original build, and I am very happy to say that so many of the cards in the original build dropped in price that it made so much room for new toys in this version of Windgrace. Anytime I update these decks, I try to keep them within the original build parameters, and Soul of Windgrace is no different. I do feel a little iffy dropping my land count down as low as 41 for this specific deck, but I think it'll be okay. I think we'll manage. All in all, this is a super fun landfall commander that has a lot of options for winning the game. Straight up Voltron with Black Blade, token synergies with all of our cards that even allow us to basically create our Hoof the Tokens with Tumbleweed, and then of course a burn side action of a thing we can do depending on what our board state looks like. This gives us so many angles to attack our opponents from. All that's left to do is make sure that we've got the cards we need, and this is the only deck that I would run all the hidden lands in, because we get to use them over and over and over and over again here. Like I will be honest, the reason I love this deck, the main reason I love this deck, is being able to abuse those hidden lands and get that Discover 4 every time we sacrifice them, and then reuse them with Soul of Windgrace. It's such a fun mechanic because I like that gambling aspect of the deck, and it allows the deck to basically play without any cards in hand at all. It can just dump its hand down early and then use those lands to just keep on playing irrespective of what the heck the board state looks like. You don't have to care at all. You just have to keep on cascading until you win. It's such a fun strategy. That all said, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did like this deck and you have a friend who wants to play Landfall, maybe send this video to them and let them know, hey, subscribe, hit the like button, all that stuff the algorithm truly adores. And as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Mark Anthony, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fire Shard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.